Broadcasting from the Symphony studio in Marietta, Georgia, it's time for the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. Tune in every week as we spotlight the very best minds in our industry. Now, here are your hosts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the 11th episode of the Technology Harmony Podcast, brought to you by Symphony Technology Solutions. I am one of your hosts, Katie Galley, and I am joined by my co-host today, Trey Gaskins. How are you doing, Trey?
I'm doing great, Katie. How are you?
I am doing awesome. I'm super excited to dive in today. Did you have a good week?
I've had a great week. It's another week that's just flown by, and with all the craziness that's going on, I can't believe the weeks just go by in a blank. But happy to be here, and looking forward to talking with Shawn today.
Me too. I'm super excited. And yeah, you're right. The weeks kind of just go by, but we're having fun. And we get to spend the weeks doing this amazing podcast. And so in this series, we are speaking with and learning from the top thought leaders in the property tech space. And in the Symphony studio with us today, we are lucky enough to have the manager of technology construction services at Holder Construction Company, Shawn Griggs. How are you doing, Shawn?
I am doing great. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely.
I'll take every chance I can get to talk about our company.
There you go. Good. Well, we're super excited, Shawn, to have you and to learn more about you and your position and Holder. So, Shawn, just to get to know your background a little bit, can you tell us about your own professional journey and how you got the job that you have today?
I'm a little bit different than most of the folks in our company. As a construction management firm, we hire a lot of folks out of school that were construction management majors. Myself, when I finished school, I started working for a company named APC, which is now part of Schneider Electric, a bigger company. But we manufactured battery backup systems for computers, data center facilities. So my experience there kind of led me to start working for one of our local partner companies here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm based. So we ran around the city and the state, somewhat acting like a general contractor to help clients build smaller computer room facilities. That led me to a few years of working for a data center infrastructure management software company, DSIM. One of my colleagues, while I was in that role, had been a subcontractor to Holder Construction. And during that process, the folks at Holder, had a conversation with him, and they explained that their clients had asked them to sort of stretch their services farther into the data center room and to start doing things like putting in IT racks, IT enclosures, power distribution equipment, which were all part of what I did with APC. So kind of a coincidence. A colleague called me and said, "Hey, I got an opportunity for you. Would you be interested in talking to Holder?" Spent a month or so talking to the folks at Holder, understanding what they were looking for. And I just happened to have a background that was very similar to what they wanted to do. So it was really my involvement in the data center industry that got me to Holder Construction. So it was somewhat of a probably 15-year process before I got to Holder, but it was certainly a good move. I'm glad that I spoke to them, and I'm glad that I was able to come over and join the company here. Absolutely.
And so, Shawn, can you talk a little bit about then what Holder does?
Sure. We're a national construction management firm. So we work with clients that range from data center clients. So that would be somewhat of your big five hyperscale type companies. We build directly for them. We build data center facilities for your co-location hosting clients, which typically have one of the big five taking space in their facility. So we also do commercial construction, commercial office construction. We do a lot of work for higher education, and probably over the past 10 years or so, a lot more work in the aviation market. So we've, but our job is to manage the whole construction process. So that is everything from some conceptual estimating design support, through hiring the right subcontractors, through managing them, and managing the entire construction process.
Gotcha. And so, Shawn, for you specifically, from when you got started with Holder to where you've grown now as the manager of technology construction services, what does that role entail, and what do you do with it?
So when we're building any type of facility nowadays, whether or not it's a data center facility or a commercial office, and certainly an airport facility, you've got your typical construction scopes of work, so to speak: concrete, steel, what in the industry they'll call the bricks and sticks. Well, more and more technology scopes of work are becoming a bigger part of the project, not only from a scope standpoint or amount of work, but also from a budgetary standpoint. So when I say building technology services, some people use the phrase special systems, but you're really talking about security systems. You're talking about voice and data network, wireless networks, AV systems, can be lighting controls. So there's kind of a host of different technologies that have to go into our projects now. So if you look at it, building a physical building, concrete, steel, paint, drywall, all those things that go into building a facility are sort of the housing for these technology systems. So if you think about it, if we build a building for you and you're watching us dig in the dirt, you're watching concrete come out of the ground and steel and everything else, you're thinking, this is going great. This process is great. Holder Construction's doing great. But the actual real end user is the employee that's going to walk in the building or use the building. And if you're talking about an airport, it's the passengers that are going through the airport. Well, if these technology systems aren't working, they're not happy. So think about it. If you walk into your office and your badge or your ID card doesn't work and unlocking the door and you can't get in the building, you're not real happy. If you get in and you sit down at your desk and you don't have internet connection, or if your cell phone doesn't work within the building, you're not happy. You can't do your job. If you walk into a conference room and the video conferencing system, like we're using right now, doesn't work, well, you're not happy. You can't connect outside the building. So it's kind of a little phrase that I use within the company is, 1% of the budget could wind up being 99% of the problems. And that's what you don't want to have. You want to have the end user and each individual person that's using the facility to be happy. So what we learned over time was that we needed to have a group that focuses on those scopes of work specifically. Because as I mentioned, we hire a lot of construction management, I call them kids now, I'm getting older, but straight from college. And they have a lot of knowledge, in the construction process and those typical traditional construction scopes of work. So these types of systems that I help deal with are not necessarily things that a lot of people have a ton of experience with. You have folks that either I work in the IT department of this company, or I work for an IT services company, but you don't have many people who are really dealing with the actual construction and implementation piece of those scopes of work in the middle of a construction process. So it's a focus that has grown within our company. We've added a few more people that are specific to these scopes of work. But overall, we are still technically part of what we call our MEP and Building Technologies Services Group. So in total, that's about 117 people within Holder. Majority are focused on mechanical and electrical and plumbing, but we're growing as far as what we're doing for these technologies or special systems. So my role is to take everything from conceptual estimating, design budgeting, through procurement, hiring the subcontractors, and helping our teams on site get the work in place.
So Shawn, from a technology standpoint, you've been around long enough to see a lot of changes over the last couple years, can you reflect, how are things different today than maybe 10 years ago from a technology standpoint? You got your MEP plus T. Some of our clients, have tried to elevate technology where it's right on par with MEP and it's not as much of an afterthought. But talk about what's happening change-wise in the last 10 years, and then maybe talk about where you think things are going in the future for technology.
Sure. Yeah, last 10 years, the biggest change that we've seen is, expanding scopes of work. So, take distributed antenna systems, which I know you guys deal with. That scope is expanding, from a first responder standpoint to wireless small cell DAS. So as more and more things are done remotely, using our phones, using technology like that, these systems are becoming more and more important. So I think from a change standpoint, it used to just be, some security and some communications cabling. Well, as wireless has grown, those systems are incorporated into it now. As security systems are becoming more and more complex, we're seeing now, ironically, on some projects we're working on now, from a parking standpoint, we're seeing a lot more technology. So now you've got your advanced parking, your automated parking guidance system. So all of a sudden, when you pull into a parking deck, let's say the Atlanta airport, for example, there's a system there telling you where spaces are, where you should go to park. Well, there's also a revenue system. You're paying for parking. Well, projects are starting to happen where those two systems have to be tied into each other. Well, if they have premium spaces versus standard spaces, you go into that deck, you go park, the parking guidance system tells you where to park and tracks what kind of space you're in. So when you go to leave and you're processing the payment, that system knows exactly what to charge you. So things like that, I would say from a standpoint of technology becoming a part of every project, that's the biggest change. There's obviously continuing upgrades and changes to equipment, security camera types, card reader types, biometric readers, things like that are, kind of your standard technology development. But from a standpoint of a construction management firm, the biggest changes are us having to deal with those scopes more and more, and our clients expecting us to deal with those scopes. So for a long time, they handled them themselves. They build a building, we'll put that stuff in. Well, now speed of construction, the time frames on these projects, those scopes are being turned over to us to handle in conjunction with the client and their internal technology groups. I think as far as moving forward, I think we'll continue to see more of these technology scopes just advancing and developing. Right now, you think of IoT and smart buildings and all those sorts of technologies. You hear about those, you see them at conferences. From our standpoint, as of now, we have not seen a big push for us to handle those scopes of work. And we're not seeing them on all our projects as much as we actually thought we would, 2 years ago. We're not really seeing a lot of, say, irrigation automated controls. We're not seeing a whole lot of automated window blinds, window curtains. We are starting to see some of it. We're starting to see some view glass, systems that track the sun, gradually automatically tint, untint windows. That's something we've seen here probably in the past year. But as far as these super advanced smart building technologies, we're not seeing those yet. I think they've been a little slower to integrate into our projects than we thought, but we will still see a gradual increase in those, and sooner or later we're going to be expected to build a building where if you roll up to your parking space, building knows you're there, building turns on the lights in your office and sets the temperature where you want it, I think eventually we're going to get there. There are some buildings in Europe that are models of that, but here I think that the future is going to be seeing more and more technologies like that involved in construction projects or new construction projects.
From a wired and wireless standpoint, it seems like a couple years back, everything had to have that physical wired connection, but more and more businesses and buildings, you need to be able to embrace wireless technologies. Can you talk about what you've seen, the kind of obvious trends, but what you've seen grow in the wireless side of the house?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some clients, I would say, maybe it's 25% of the projects where they are going all wireless. And we are not putting in a physical network structured cabling infrastructure in those projects. Some are half and half. The data center facilities themselves, those are, you've got miles and miles of fiber and copper cabling in there, and that's not going to change for what they do. Mm-hmm. But when you're talking about commercial offices, higher education spaces, wireless is always there, either as well as that wired infrastructure or just in place of it. We've, as more things become smart using wireless technologies, it's really become almost a necessity. In our offices, we built I guess it's actually 3 years ago now, moved in June into our office, and we have connections at our desk, but no one uses them. I mean, it's everyone's wireless. You've got huddle rooms, conference rooms, all those types of facilities that you need to walk into, walk out of. We're constantly moving around in the building, either scheduled meetings in these rooms or impromptu, but you have to be able to move around the facility. And one of the things that facilitates that is also from a construction standpoint. So if you're wireless, you've got to be in tune with the actual architecture of the room and the interiors of the building. So, when you're doing wireless surveys ahead of time, trying to design the system, changes a little bit in the way the architecture is done, so that you've got plenty of coverage and you don't have a lot of specific walls, things like that are going to block signal. But again, we're seeing some go to strictly wireless, but 99.9% of the time there is wireless and a physical structured cabling system.
So, y'all build quality buildings, and again, it's up to kind of what your client's looking for. But in a lot of the new construction these days, they're putting in the lead windows. Can you talk about if you've got a more vertical, call it a vertical building, but you've got a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, you've got the lead windows. What does that do to the mobile signal that's trying to get into the property? And then what solutions are out there that y'all are looking at to enhance that?
Well, the interesting part is, most people would think that, hey, it's all glass. My cell phone should work anywhere. It's actually a lot of those materials and a lot of that glass actually blocks the signal worse than concrete. So as a response to that, wireless distributed antenna systems are what we're putting in. So, you need to have your signal everywhere within the building, and those systems are what allows it to happen. But again, it was news to me and interesting to me to really start seeing that and understand that glass doesn't mean that you have a signal. It actually can be worse than traditional wall material. So that's the biggest change we're seeing. And from our standpoint as a construction management company, one of the things we take pride in is having knowledge of the systems that we're installing. So having the understanding of things that affect that, understanding how these systems get installed, the components of these systems, is a big piece of what we do and sort of the value-added service that we bring to our clients. It's not we're not just a dumb construction company. We don't know what we're putting in. We don't understand how it works. We don't understand how it works with other systems. It's important that we know that. So I wanted to point that out because, today, again, we're talking about technology. We have to keep up with those systems and really understand them and how they relate to construction of a building and operation of a building.
And
So
so,
when you're
Shawn,
looking,
go ahead, Trey.
when you're looking for a partner to help you with the installation of that, what do you look for in a low voltage integrator? What kind of qualities and skills are you looking for the people that you end up partnering with?
I would say, obviously, having the certifications, expertise in those systems. We don't write specifications. The design firm that's hired by the owner writes those. But, if there are specific systems spec or if it's more of a performance spec, obviously we're looking for companies who have the expertise, knowledge, and experience with those specific systems and products. That, of course, is a big plus. But a big piece of what we focus on now is we look for experience in similar projects, but really we focused a lot on the teams, the implementation style, who we're going to be working with at that subcontractor. We look more at the team as a whole. I mean, we've gotten to a point where, we understand the technology and what it takes to put it in, as much as we need to. But when the feet hit the street, so to speak, and our teams are on site trying to put this work in place, much like the mechanical contractors and electrical contractors, we need to have subcontractors who have a really strong management team in place. Our superintendents want to know, who is my guy at this company? So that's going to be the person that I go to for anything I need. So from the evaluation process, it's not just, hey, what's your price? Do you have the right scope of work included in it? It is, who is your team? All right, yes, you got the scope, cost. We've got that kind of figured out. That makes sense. But who's your team? Who's going to run these jobs? What's their experience? So that's a big element of what we look for many of the companies that we want to hire. It's definitely different for a lot of these scopes of work when they're working in a live construction environment. So again, experience with putting these systems in a construction environment is a big deal to us. One example is a very large project in Atlanta, and one of the special systems contractors very early on said that, hey, we're not going to run any fiber, any copper in this area until every other contractor and scope of work is done and gone, which obviously in a construction project does not work in any way, shape, or form. So companies that have experience in new construction projects or even in retrofit or remodel projects is huge. So that's a couple of things that are outside the what's your scope, what's your price scenario.
In times past, sometimes on a big project like that, you might have 5 or 6 different, you might have an access control sub, a security camera sub, a fiber cabling sub, you might have a DAS person, an ERCS person, and you can have a lot of different firms, and then you got some kind of coordination challenges. Would you prefer 5 different small firms that have to figure out how to work together, or one a little bit larger firm that can handle all of that scope? Is there a preference for you?
That answer is actually in progress within the organization. So if we have a company that is capable of being somewhat of a master systems integrator, is a typical term, that can either utilize their own personnel typically in combination with subcontractors or sub-tier contractors. If we can have a partner that can really manage those subcontractors well, it does help us. It can help us tremendously as far as resources required on site, cost to the owner. I mean, if we have less resources on site, it can reduce the cost to our client. So you kind of have that one school of thought of hey, it can reduce costs and can reduce our manpower on site. But you also have the other school of thought that subcontractors don't manage subcontractors well. And it obviously can depend on who you're dealing with. But from what I would use the term old school construction standpoint, a superintendent that's been in the industry for 30 years, they're very skeptical of using that scenario. There is that thought process of, we're a construction management firm. We have our personnel on site to manage the construction. We can do it by breaking it up into 4 different scopes of work and managing them independently. We can do it better than a master systems integrator could do it. So over time, I would say probably the last 6-7 years especially, we've had a lot of debate about that internally. And we have companies where it's been done, sometimes successfully, sometimes not successfully, which unfortunately just keeps the discussion going further because both sides have a little bit of ammo. But it's a tough one to answer right now. At this point, I couldn't say, yes, we prefer to have a master systems integrator, or no, we don't. Smaller jobs, we typically do consider that and would use that more often than on these large projects. So if we're building a large commercial building or we're expanding, adding a concourse to an airport somewhere, it's less likely. But it's something that if there's some folks out there, they've got an opportunity. If they get with us and our competitors, other companies like ours, you can be really good at it. There's a group of companies you need to be reaching out to, because it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a fine balance between trying to be everything to everybody, and I know at Symphony we've tried to be very strategic and trying to understand what is our core competency. And as our company's grown over the last couple of years, we've got, frankly, about 7 core competencies that are all interrelated. But a lot of the feedback that we've heard from clients like you is that we would rather, for some items, we would rather deal with one company, and instead of having it subbed out, we just do it internally. But we're trying to listen to folks like y'all. And again, we don't want to say, we're not here to replace you, but if there's a technology solution, we've gotten a lot of good feedback that in certain areas, if we can be wide and deep in those and kind of make sure our box is well defined and excel there, that would be a benefit. So
yeah, and when companies do that well, you as say a Symphony, I mentioned before, we want to have a certain amount of knowledge of these scopes of work. But there are companies that deal with it just that day in and day out, and can be a systems integrator to add a ton of value to us. So it's really, it's a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
But, we certainly have examples of good, the bad, and the ugly, like anything else.
Right. Hey, how about from a COVID standpoint? That's kind of a new thing that we're all trying to deal with. Have you heard or discussed how new buildings in the future could be more COVID friendly? Does anything jump out at you on areas that will likely change in the near future?
Yeah, so far, the one thing that we're seeing is going to be the sort of architectural design of these buildings. So if you look at our office now, we have the open workspace. Well, if you're talking about trying to social distance people, the design of these buildings is going to have to change some. So we, for example, when we start bringing people back into the office, that's a big concern. We don't have big high cubicle walls anymore that really separate people from each other. You don't have those large cubicles anymore that kind of provide a natural barrier between people. So I think the biggest change is going to really fall on the design firms to start designing facilities with this sort of thing in mind. I haven't seen any new designs specifically, but that's going to be a big change in the construction industry. And we kind of laugh, on all of our project sites, we've got our construction trailers. We laugh that we're keeping plexiglass companies in business because within all of our construction trailers, we've been erecting plexiglass to keep people as separated as possible that are working in those construction trailers that are not in an office.
Right.
And so, Shawn, now with that in mind and all of the technological advancements that have been rapidly happening the last couple of months, and now looking forward, like Trey had asked about with reflecting on COVID-19, what's on the horizon for Holder?
Continuing to expand really our safety initiatives. That's going to be the number one thing. So, as we've been dealing with it so far, maintaining, doing everything we can to have workers maintain social distancing, masks required, where social distancing is absolutely not an option for what the folks are doing. Masks and face shields are required. We check temperature of everyone that goes on the site every day. Those sort of things are going to have to continue and expand. So, for us, on the horizon, it's a bigger job for our safety group. They're not just dealing with making sure people are safe from physical harm on a job site. They're going to have to continue and grow our efforts in making sure people are medically safe. Also, I think that's the biggest thing that's kind of on the immediate horizon. And again, more long term, it's kind of goes back to really the design of the buildings to try and have it in a way that in the future maybe people can still be going to the office rather than working from home, but some of that's kind of yet to be seen.
Right. And it's just kind of, taking it in stride because it was something we didn't anticipate. And so kind of seeing what happens next. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for sharing your insight and your background. If someone wanted to learn more about you and learn more about Holder, where might they do that?
So if they want to learn more about the company, just go to holderconstruction.com. Real easy to navigate that site and learn about our company as a whole. If anybody wants to reach out to me, my email is sgriggs@holder.com. So that's SGRIGGS@holder.com.
Thank you all for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To learn more about our guest and their company, check out the show notes for the relevant links. If you would like to learn more about us here at Symphony, of course, subscribe to our podcast on our YouTube channel. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Symphony Technology Solutions and on Instagram at Symphony Tech Solutions. Here at Symphony, our ultimate goal is to make harmonious music out of all the technological noise. And we hope today's episode helped in doing just that. See you next time.